There are two classes of MHCs, class 1 and class 2. Class 1 MHCs are going to be expressed on the membranes of all nucleated cells within your body. That means there is only one type of cell that does not have a class 1 MHC, and that is a mature erythrocyte or red blood cell. That's because, remember, mature red blood cells are anucleated. They eject the nucleus before they go into the blood vessel. So all cells except for mature erythrocytes will have class 1 MHCs, and that's these purple structures. In this case, the antigen is the red triangle. MHC class 1 will be recognized by a type of T lymphocyte or T cell called a CD8 cell. Now the CD8 cell, once it comes in contact with its antigen attached to an MHC, class 1 will be activated and become cytotoxic T cells. We'll talk about what cytotoxic T cells do a little bit later, but they're going to be involved in directly killing virus-infected cells and tumor cells and so forth. This is a CD protein. It is a CD8. A CD8 cell then, once it's activated, becomes a cytotoxic T cell, and there is the T cell receptor. And as I mentioned before, the T cell receptor will bind to, in this case, since it's a CD8 T cell, will bind to an MHC class 1 antigen complex. And when that does, the CD8 will also bind to this complex. You can see that little binding site right there. That's for the CD8 protein. The type of antigens that are going to be bound to the MHC class 1 are what we call endogenous antigens. And so endogenous antigens are antigens that come from intracellular pathogens or abnormal proteins that are produced by cancer cells. Endo means from inside, so endogenous means that these antigens arise from inside the cell that is expressing them. So the message here that is being sent to the T cell that recognizes the MHC class 1 and the antigen that binds with it is, I have captured or I have been infected by this foreign cell or virus or whatever. This is what it looks like. Kill any cell that displays this antigen, because that means they are infected by the same type of virus. Or if you're a cancer cell, I'm cancerous, I'm expressing this antigen that is a cancer protein. Any cell that has this antigen being expressed on its MHC class 1, kill it. Keep in mind that when you're talking about adaptive immune responses, the lymphocytes are specific as to the antigens that they will recognize and bind with. Each antigen has its own specific lymphocyte that can be activated by that antigen. Class 2 MHC proteins, these are going to be expressed on antigen presenting cells. That's what APC stands for, antigen presenting cells. These include dendritic cells and macrophages, and they will also be found on B cells, and I'll explain what that function will be a little bit later. And here's the antigen, the red structure on the MHC class 2, and that area right there, that little pocket, is where the CD4 protein is going to bind. So what type of T cell recognizes and binds with this MHC class 2 antigen complex? It is a CD4 cell. The naive CD4 cell means that it hasn't encountered its antigen. When it does encounter the antigen and becomes activated, it will become a helper T cell. So these are going to become helper T cells. And there is the CD4. So the CD4 will bind to that little pocket and then the T cell receptor will bind to the antigen MHC class II. The type of antigens that are expressed or bound to MHC class II are what we call exogenous antigens. Remember that dendritic cells and macrophages are phagocytic cells, and they eat an external cell. They bring it in, they break it down, they take molecules of what they've broken down, and they can bind those to MHC class IIs, and these molecules can function as antigens. The information or the message that is being sent to the CD4 cell, the T cell, is that this is what the foreign invader looks like. Go look for it. I've eaten it. I'm expressing the antigen, one of the molecules from the foreign invader. Go look for it and get rid of it. Adaptive immunity involves B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes, as well as antigen-presenting cells, or APCs, which are your macrophages and your dendritic cells. I have dendritic cells in blue here. In bold is because they are the main antigen-presenting cells. Both macrophages and dendritic cells are part of the innate immune response, and they will help link the innate and adaptive immune responses. They phagocytize the pathogen as part of the innate immune response. They are nonspecific, so they will eat any type of pathogen. And then they're going to take the antigens from the pathogen and bind them to the MHC class IIs and go and present these to the CD4 cells that are specific for that particular antigen. And in that way, they're going to be involved in activating T cells. So that's the link between the innate and the adaptive immune response. Macrophages and dendritic cells will have MHC class IIs, but because they have nuclei, they will also have MHC class Is. So all cells would have MHC class Is except for mature red blood cells. B lymphocytes, recall, have MHC class IIs. We're going to see how B lymphocytes are actually going to present antigens to helper T cells, and we'll look at that relationship there later.